The Precure series has had my attention for a while now, mostly because of how well regarded and oft recommended the Heartcatch series is. Combine that with the recommendation of a certain popular YouTuber whose opinion I hold in high regard, and my curiosity couldn't hold out much longer. It's long past time I watch Heartcatch, but before that, I figured it'd be best to go back and start Precure from the beginning. Along the way, I figured I'd record my thoughts and share them, and that's what this is. This is gonna be a long journey. And it's starting with Futari wa Precure. Before I dive into the series proper, you should know the context I'm approaching this series with. I like the magical girl genre. It fascinates me that a genre like this with such narrow parameters exists and flourishes as it does, but I'm not too deep into it, at least not yet. I love Cardcaptor Sakura, for instance, but haven't seen the original Sailor Moon. Nanoha gets better as it goes, and of course, I like that one that everyone else hypes to no end. This is all to say, I'm experienced with the genre, but still learning. I anticipate this journey will teach me new things, but in the meantime, I'm going to be judging Precure based on what I know. Should I learn something new in the future that invalidates any point I make here, I'll be sure to bring it up in a later video. I'm going to be spoiling the entire show in this video, so if you want the short version, here it is. Futari wa Precure is fine, if you like magical girls. If you don't, there's nothing here for you. The characters will annoy you, heavy scene recycling will irk you, you'll basically find little, if anything, of value. If you're like me though, that is to say insane, it has barely enough going for it to carry its 49 episodes, and we're about to get into why. Final spoiler warning. Futari wa Precure started out strong. The opening episode delivered likable protagonists and some kick-ass action. Compared to its brethren like Nanoha, it's more action-packed and more exciting than Cardcaptor Sakura, though without the trashy otaku pandering of the former. Family-friendly middle ground between the two. Nagisa is shown to be sporty and strong, Honoka to be smart and science-y, both atypical girls' roles making them good role models for the target audience, but that's not all there is to them. They're fun, friendly, sociable, entertaining characters to follow, with Nagisa especially being a goof. They're made even more enjoyable when they have to deal with sudden magic powers. The introduction to the magical girl element is similarly strong. It's sudden, hitting Nagisa in the head for comedic effect, and the two get thrust into a cool, well-animated fight scene that climaxes at them throwing a big fuck you laser in a moment of maximum excitement. It was a thrilling scene that capped off an already fun episode and made me excited to watch the rest of the show. Fun characters, cool action, big laser. Yes! The show then proceeded to repeat that formula 40-odd times. Hyperbole, of course, but not by much. With very few exceptions, every episode starts with Nagisa and Honoka trying to do some fun, wacky thing, getting interrupted by the bad guys, then solving the bad guy problem with a big fuck you laser. Part of this I'm fine with. Of course I want to see the main characters get up to wacky hijinks. I like fun, after all. It's the action scenes the show's formula really hurts. The fights are usually well animated, occasionally disgustingly so, a highlight for me being the giant samurai fight from episode 15, and they might be exciting if it wasn't painfully obvious how each and every one of them was going to end. The big fuck you laser. I'm not exaggerating here, that is how every fight save maybe 3 is resolved. Here, I'll prove it to you. Here's every fight that ends like that. And that's boring. It was impossible to get invested in the vast majority of these fights because going into them, I knew how they were going to end. The most interesting encounters in this series break this pattern, though they're few, and don't stray too hard from the foundation the first episode laid. The fight in episode 16, for instance, has an interesting setup, with the bad guys creating evil clones of a classmate and the girls having to save the real one. Cool concept, held my interest, yet how is it resolved? Big fuck you laser. Episode 20 got my hopes up when the first laser missed, an oh shit moment that was genuinely hilarious, but after some more fighting and determination, they resolved the fight with another big fuck you laser. Though, to be fair, its use is more creative this time around. Instead of firing it towards the bad guy, both halves travel separately through her hair to impact her, which is pretty rad. To me, the big fuck you laser, named in the show, is lazy. It's an easy way for the writers to resolve every fight without having to think of unique combat scenarios or strategies for the girls to use to deal with each encounter. Contrast this lazy, samey approach with any other magical girl show, For our purposes, let's look at Cardcaptor Sakura. The show has the main character, Sakura, collecting Clo cards, magic cards, causing mischief whose powers she can use when she catches them. Each Clo card has its own ability, meaning Sakura is constantly dealing with new, unique threats, and she can't use the same strategy each time. What's more, she's constantly gaining new abilities, so in general, each counter is a combination of new problems and Sakura using her ever-expanding abilities to figure out how to deal with those problems. Meaning no two Clo card encounters are the same, which is far more interesting than Precure's approach, where Nagisa and Honoka repeatedly fight the same group of bad guys and always resolve it with a big fuck you laser. Snore. What's especially frustrating about the over-reliance on the laser is the show proves it can be interesting without it. Episode 21 has the two in an emotionally charged fight with a character they've been making friends with, and it doesn't end with a laser, but a tearful farewell. It was such a drastic change of pace that I was both surprised and elated. That was the most interesting encounter in the series thus far, and made me hopeful the series might provide more fresh, laserless encounters like that. Unfortunately, the episode seems to have been a happy accident as the laser quickly returns. The only other noticeable toying with the laser formula is episode 23, where it fails outright, which is an exciting oh shit moment that leads into an exciting mid-season finale that, unfortunately, ends with another big laser. So the fights themselves aren't enough to interest. What about the people Precure fight against? What about the villains? For the most part, they're boring, either being evil for the sake of it, or being evil in service of the big bad, the Dark King, who is evil for evil's sake. I can think of only one exception to that, the boy named Kiria from the show's first half. He's the only interesting villain in the show because, unlike the rest, he has a character arc. He becomes friends with the main cast, and after an emotional confrontation with Precure, he changes for the better, and ends up helping them during the final battle. It's nothing too complicated, but it's something, which is more than I can say for the rest of the villains. Too bad he's absent for most of the show. After his emotional scene, he disappears for nearly 30 episodes until his grand reappearance in the final battle, which feels like a terrible waste. The only other villain of note is the big bad, the Dark King. He's visually impressive, a constant oppressing force looming in the distance for the whole show. Beyond that, though, there's nothing to him. He's evil for evil's sake. When he monologues at Nagisa and Honoka, he drones on about it being fate for darkness to win, which I guess is enough of a reason for the two to need to stop him, but it doesn't make for a compelling conflict. There's nothing to the main conflict in the show outside of the painfully simple light versus dark. Add on to that few of the fights having any tension, and you have nearly half the show having little of interest or excitement. But okay, fighting and villains aren't all there are to these shows. What about the main characters? They're fine, occasionally good. They're distinct in design and personality, though in both cases they draw uncanny parallels to their Cardcaptor counterparts. They're at their weakest when they're alone. Nagisa's the sporty one, and when she's not with Honoka, that's the thing she does, and little else. Same with Honoka and her science. They do have their little flourishes, but they normally don't add much. They're usually detrimental, in fact, especially with Nagisa. She can be clumsy, lazy, forgetful, all of which seem to be for comedic effect, but in actuality are just cringe-inducing. For example, later in the series, she's Romeo during their class play, and she forgets her lines during the performance. Her facial expressions and tone of voice tell me this is supposed to be a comedic scene, but the writing makes it painful to watch. Here's a likable character we've been watching putting forth a good effort to perform well, and to watch her fail and be miserable while doing so isn't fun. It's hard to sit through. The worst of Nagisa's flourishes is her love interest, her crush on an older boy lovingly nicknamed Fujipi. This love interest is frustrating because it's a constant reminder of Nagisa's stubborn, eternal refusal to grow up. She's in love with this no-personality pretty boy from the get-go, and she's given chance after chance after chance to confess to him, and each and every time she gets flustered or nervous and backs down. Early on, Honoka's friendship with Fujipi causes Nagisa to get jealous for a while, and she gets distracted during an important match, a series of events which is neither funny nor interesting, just frustrating. I don't want to see the sporty hero fight with her friend and suck at her job because she's flustered over a boy. That makes me want to slap her and tell her to get her shit together. Maybe if this happened once or twice it would be tolerable, but this is a constant through the whole show. Even during the last few episodes, when one of Nagisa's friends tells her to her face that she's going to confess to Fujipi, Nagisa doesn't do anything about it. This right here, Nagisa's absolute refusal to face her feelings and grow the fuck up, is the single most frustrating element of her character. Imagine for a moment if she had confessed to him at any of the given opportunities. For Nagisa, that would have meant her growing more mature, learning through experience outside of fighting to be brave and face her fears, but no, the status quo must be maintained, and the crush never goes anywhere. That's right, despite having numerous episodes devoted to Nagisa's crush, in the end it's all pointless, because nothing ever comes of it. The most that could be said for it is that it brought Nagisa and Honoka closer, but their relationship was deepened through other conflicts anyway, so that's entirely redundant, rendering this entire subplot pointless on top of being irritating. Alone, the Precure duo is mixed, but together, Nagisa and Honoka shine. The main point of intrigue with them is their relationship. At the start of the series, the two had barely ever talked, only natural given their disparate personalities and behaviors. Circumstances beyond their control force them to come together, and their growing friendship provides an emotional core that carries the series. The most memorable moments of Futari wa Precure were little ones where the relationship was furthered, such as this quick little moment in episode 19. Which serves as a great visual example of the progress in their relationship up to that point. Just a few episodes earlier, they were fighting over something asinine. On the one hand, that episode was irritating because the conflict felt stupid, like it shouldn't have happened in the first place, and frustrating because it wasn't interesting in the slightest. It was painfully obvious how and when they were going to make up, and I just wanted that to hurry up and happen already. But that fight did serve a narrative purpose in deepening their bond, solidifying their friendship, which is cemented by this cute little dance. By the end of the series, they're inseparable, eternal friends, perfectly visually illustrated by this little scene at the end of episode 40. Goddamn cute. Unfortunately, Nagisa and Honoka aren't the only main characters in this series. They've got their cute stuffed animal sidekicks that grant them their magical abilities always by their side. Meppel and Mipple, and Podun, who joins in halfway through the show. Before I talk about them directly, let's take a step back and look at another cute animal companion from another magical girl show for the second comparison. Keto from Cardcaptor Sakura is an invaluable partner to Sakura. His knowledge of the Clo cards helps her get through many a scrape, and while Kero may be a glutton and occasionally causes Sakura grief, the pair always manage to maintain a friendly relationship, and Keto's always there to help when he could. They made a genuinely good team, and watching gave the distinct impression that Sakura would have had a much rougher time and a little less fun if Keto hadn't been there. Contrast with Meppel, Mipple, and Podun, who at the best of times are just there, but usually are loud and obnoxious and sometimes a hindrance to the girls' everyday lives, meaning they're worse in comparison to Kero in every conceivable fashion. It's mostly Meppel and Podun guilty of the irritation. Meppel, for instance, will start whining in the middle of class for Nagisa to feed him. Keep in mind that Nagisa and Honoka are keeping the whole Precure thing a secret. Not only is the whine irritating, but the act of the whine puts Nagisa in a bad situation, all of which makes me view Meppel as a self-centered dick. The number of times Meppel pulls a stunt like that is too high to count, and none of them endear me to him, only make me want to punch him in the face. Then we have Podun, who's at least 10 times worse. You see, he's a genuine child, which means he whines more frequently, and that his whines are more high-pitched and therefore more irritating, and that his whines are for even stupider reasons, such as "Wah, play with me," or "Wah, I didn't win the game." As for Mipple, well, she's mostly just there. The most interesting thing she ever does is get into one argument with Meppel, which is quickly resolved, and that's it. If it weren't for the fact that these three were integral to providing Nagisa and Honoka with their powers, I would have seriously been rooting for the two to abandon the animals on the side of the road. But as it stands, I could only quietly hope for that impossibility. I wish that the series had taken lessons from its predecessors and made these integral mascot characters more likable, whether it be by having them get along with their partners most of the time instead of occasionally, then have cute moments together, or by having them be less of a nuisance, or by having them be more useful in battle, or something. Anything to make me not want to strangle them. But enough about that nonsense. Let's talk about animation and presentation. I've mentioned numerous times the quality of the fight scenes, and I'll gladly reiterate that. The animation in these scenes, at its best, is fluid and exhilarating. It's not afraid to stretch or break character models for the sake of looking cool, and the scenes are better for that. Outside of the fights, the animation is mid-2000s standard, mostly consisting of characters standing around and talking, occasionally moving, as you'd expect. There's not much to discuss in the way of shot composition or directing. Occasionally a scene played that made me go, huh, that's a pretty nice shot right there. But most of the time it was characters talking, shot, reverse shot, panned up to the sky because they don't know how to end a scene. Standard fare. There are places where the show's age is painfully apparent, namely in its integration of CG, as this was the mid-2000s, and a TV anime to boot, you know, the most well-financed arts in the world, right? Of course CG was never going to look good, but Wow, it's bad. The character of the Queen, introduced almost halfway through the show, is rendered entirely in CG. Not only is the model sparse, to say the least, but it's not even animated. Apart from 2 scenes at most, her model is entirely still for every scene she's in. Even when she's talking, her mouth doesn't move. And on top of that, whoever was in charge of editing her into the show clearly didn't know what the hell to do with her. Not that I blame them. Sometimes it's fine, the camera will be positioned far away and looking up at her, which is good considering she's a giant and supposed to be a larger-than-life figure, but then the camera will start to pan up her and suddenly stop, a jarring shift without the pan slowing beforehand. All of that is made even more bizarre by the fact that in one scene she's drawn in 2D, and drawn well, which makes me wonder, why not just do that all the time? Another matter of presentation I need to mention. Scene recycling. Many magical girl shows are guilty of this, the transformation scene being such a common trope that is easily forgivable when done in this series. What's less forgiving is when scene recycling is done frequently outside of that. I've already bragged on about the series' over-reliance on the big fuck you laser attack. Did I also mention that every time they use it, the exact same 20-30 second animation is played? Did I mention that this laser is sometimes used twice in one episode? I wasn't very far into the series before I got bored with these scenes and started skipping them. The first time was cool, but the 30th? Stop. Please. Indulge me for one last Cardcaptor Sakura comparison. I posit that Futari wa Precure does nothing that wasn't better accomplished by Cardcaptor Sakura. An athletic protagonist who's easily distracted, a cute little magical animal friend, frequently having to deal with new magical problems, love interests, but where Nagisa's frequent distractions and flusters are frustrating due to her refusal to change, Sakura's moments are cute, and over the course of the show, she learns to better herself. The cute magical animal friend in Sakura is much more likable, the magical problems are more varied and interesting, and the love interest is so much more thoroughly thought out and explored, where Nagisa refuses to do anything about her feelings which only serves to hurt both herself and frustrate the viewer. Sakura grows up and learns to leave behind her initial crush, and in the end confesses to her, for lack of a better term, true love. You know, character growth. For all that and more, I can find no reason to watch Futari wa Precure when you can just go watch Cardcaptor Sakura instead. I'm over 3,000 words in now and I think it's high time to stop. Futari wa Precure in summary. Some of its characters are fine, some are not. Some fights are cool, most are undercut by a predictable and boring finale. It's overall a mixed bag of a show that I find hard to recommend to anyone, unless you're really, really into magical girls. But in that case, you're probably already much more invested in the Precure franchise than I am. But hey, I sat through all 49 episodes, and while I was sometimes bored, I'm still glad I watched it. I don't think I'll ever be rewatching it, but having the experience under my belt feels good. And now it's time to move on. Up next in the series is Futari wa Precure Max Heart, a direct sequel to the first seasons that started airing the week after the first series ended. 47 episodes and 2 movies. I'll be watching at a rate of 3-ish a day from the time this video goes up. Do the math and expect my video on Max Heart within a month of finishing it. Thank you for sitting through my aimless rambling for however long this took. Please share your thoughts in the comments, and if you liked this, stick around. There's more where this came from on its way. I'll see you later.